Hello, everyone, and hi, Ed. It's great to see you. I'm Pastor Jerry Gerardo with Lighthouse Christian Church in Novato.
And this is Ed Mabry with faithbyreason.net.
Great to see you, brother,
Great
as always.
Too.
And again, Merry Christmas to you and your family, your precious family.
Yeah, same to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, my goodness, moving forward in Revelation, we got a lot of ground to cover, and you're just doing a fantastic job. We got through the letters to the 7 churches, which were so helpful and instructive. Amazing words from the Lord for all of us to delve into. And now we're in Revelation chapter 4 with this latest episode of Revelation Unveiled on Faith by Reason. It's, wow, a dramatic shift in scenery from what's going on in these churches down here on earth and a glimpse into heaven itself. So tell us about this shift in reference to the church and, give us some description of what's going on in chapter 4.
Sure. Well, the big picture overview is light. When you see the throne room of God, there's light everywhere. Let me back up and answer the first part of your question, like how about the scene shift. So yes, very dramatic shift in scenery. We go from very terrestrial scene where, starting with chapter 1, John's on the Isle of Patmos. He sees a vision of Christ and this lampstands and the 7 stars and all that. Then we spent quite a few weeks, almost, I think about 15 weeks just on the churches, terrestrial churches in Asia Minor, and then of course the church ages, which we've been experiencing for the past 2,000 years here on earth. Then there's just this dramatic change where John goes to heaven, and the first words in chapter 4 is after these things. And that should be a touch point to us, because in chapter 1, Jesus gave John an outline of the entire book. He said, write the things which you have seen, the things which are, and the things which shall be after these things, the Greek word metatauta. So before these things, the things he had seen was a vision of Jesus on the island of Patmos. The things which are the church age for 2,000 years. And the things which shall be after these things, metatauta, means after the church age. So now we are squarely in the future. We're past the church age now. I mean, we're still in the church age. So from chapter 4 on, we're in the future, and everything shifts spiritually, because John says he was immediately in the spirit. So one thing to keep in mind, the rest of the book of Revelation is being seen through spiritual eyes. John has been translated, at least temporarily, to a spiritual state. And once he hears a voice saying, come up here, and he sees an open door and the sound of a trumpet. Now, that seems to reflect what's called the rapture, which we'll start talking about next week. And some people see the rapture here. Whether you see it or not is not important, but what is happening here is that John is called up to a higher level, to a spiritual level, to the throne room of God, and he just sees the most brilliant light ever. And he's so overwhelmed, he describes God sitting on the throne as a sardis stone, as jewelry. Now, obviously not that God looks like a precious stone, but I think in John's mind, he can't think of anything more beautiful, more precious than these gems that I'm sure he's seen throughout his life. So he said, this is the ultimate thing I've seen that's brilliant and full of light. So he's describing colored light. So there's light everywhere. The Bible clearly says that God is light and there is no darkness in him at all, which means in heaven, there's not even a shadow. There's light everywhere. You can't even cast a shadow in heaven. There is no darkness. And John, you can just tell by the language that he is just blown away, trying to describe the glory of God in terms that hopefully we can understand, but I'm sure they don't even come even close, or like less than 1% of what is really happening. But John does the best he can, but everything is just light and beauty and brilliance in the throne. No, great explanation. And the imagery is incredible. It's going from this earth that's filled with even God's churches, the 7 churches that have issues and problems and challenges and strengths as well. But it's not this perfect picture. And now we're into this perfect glimpse. And how do you describe this? I can only try to imagine John being transported and seeing this, and then having the task of writing it out, inspired by the Holy Spirit, to give us some kind of an understanding as to how incredibly marvelous it is. And he does a good job. But that's great. Really appreciate your explanation and delving into it. The other thing that really helped me, Ed, was metatauta. After this, God is not casual with his wording in scripture. Every word is there for a reason. And after this, and that reference in terms of the shift that takes place from
the explanation of what's going on with the churches to what's going on in the heavenlies, yes, I mean, there's something that precedes and something that comes after. And what comes after is marvelous. It's incredible. So thank you for delving into the specifics of these verses too. I love the way you do that. Now, the other thing is we encounter some incredible entities, some beings up in the throne room that are like, wow. And some of these might even reference, the church itself. What do you see? What's your understanding about these entities?
Sure. So, in addition to obviously God on the throne, we're introduced, and I'm sure there's angels all around as well, angelic beings, which we'll see more in chapter 5, just multitudes, innumerable. But there are two groups that John specifically talked about. These four beasts, or four living creatures. Your Bible translation might say beasts. I think that's not the best translation. They're living creatures, and
Yes.
24 elders. Now, who are these? Well, these living creatures they're just strange looking things. John describes them as having, four of them having 6 wings, and one of them has a face like a man, one has a face like an ox or calf, one has the face of a lion, and one has the face of an eagle. And they're covered with eyes, and they have these wings, and they proclaim the holiness of God constantly. So thankfully, we have other references to them elsewhere in the Bible. And we see them in Ezekiel, and we see hints of them in Isaiah. These are called the cherubim. Now, you have to get rid of the idea of cherub, of these little chubby babies you see in medieval paintings. That's not it. These are some bad dudes. These are the guardians of God's throne. These are the most powerful created beings in existence, and they are there guarding the throne of God. We see them again. We see them earlier in Genesis chapter 3, where 2 cherubim guard the path to the tree of life. Now, some have said they're there to guard it from Adam getting back to it. I don't think so. I don't think you need 2 cherubim to keep Adam out of there. One regular angel could do that. Why do you need 2 cherubim? Why? Well, when I was in the military, one of my our drill sergeant had a little saying. He said, "You know what? How do you stop a tank? With 2 other tanks." So there are 2 cherubim there. I believe they're there to stop another cherubim from getting access to that tree of life. Now that gets into something else I want to talk about. When you see these 4 faces, man, lion, ox, and eagle, they seem to represent life on earth. You have obviously representing those, but there seems to be one category missing. Yeah. You have human beings. You have herbivores with the ox. You have avians with the eagle, and you have carnivores with the lion. What's missing are animals that are cold-blooded and scaly, such as fish and reptiles. Now, have a complete picture of what's going on. To have a complete picture of representation, you need a cherubim to represent that. Well, there was a cherub who I believe represented that, who is no longer in heaven, and that is a cherub that fell. And we read about him in Ezekiel 28 and Isaiah 14. He is called the anointed cherub that covers. He fell. That is the being that we call Satan. And this is my son who's decided to make a visit.
Yay!
But that is the entity we call Satan. And Satan is spoken of in having reptilian qualities elsewhere. In Genesis, he's called the serpent, or more accurately, the Nachash, the shining one, but which later comes to mean serpent. Later on in Revelation, he's called the great dragon. So I believe, and this is my personal belief, the Bible is not explicit here, but I think logically we can deduce that before his fall, Satan was the cherub that represented that part of the animal kingdom. And he's not there anymore for obvious reasons. He fell. So I just another thing to throw out there to add a little bit of color to what you're talking about. And you also have the 24 elders. Now, the 24 elders, you don't see them. You only see them here in this after the church age. You don't see them in Ezekiel. You don't see them in Isaiah. Any other description of the throne of God. You'll see cherubim there. You see seraphim, but never these 24 elders. I believe for a couple reasons that these 24 elders represent the believers, the church, in the form of the 12 redeemed tribes of Israel and the 12 disciples. 12 and 12 is 24. Why do I believe that? Well, the main reason, you'd have to go to next chapter, chapter 5. When I talk about this in detail, I'll talk about this in detail next week. I'm sorry, when we get to chapter 5. But they sing a song after worshiping Jesus, and they say, "You have redeemed us out of all nations and have made us kings and priests." Well, that's not something angels can sing, because some people will say that, these 24 elders are just high-ranking angels. Angels can't sing a song about being redeemed because Jesus didn't die for angels. Now,
Right.
so I believe that's one reason why I believe it's the church. Now, to be fair, there are other translations that don't say redeemed us. They say you redeemed a people, and depending on your translation, it might say that. But I think it fits because there's also one other, even more blatant reason to believe the church is in heaven at this time, because the lampstands, which are in Revelation chapter 1, Jesus blatantly says these lampstands represent the 7 churches. And when we get to chapter, and they're on earth.
Yes.
Walking, but when we get to heaven, those same lampstands are now in heaven. So if the lampstands are the church and the lampstands are in heaven, the church is in heaven. You just go back to a couple chapters.
I love it.
So there you go. So I believe that the elders represent the church, and even if I'm wrong, the lampstands are show that at this point, meta tauta, the church is in heaven, and I think that's just fantastic for us.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Absolutely. No, I see through the explanations, and I've read about some of these interpretations before, and yeah, it's compelling to me. The 24, the 12 tribes and the 12 apostles, disciples became apostles, and it just really seems like it fits. Now, God can do anything, might mean something else that wouldn't change our faith, but it sure is fascinating to look into. And we do have this great understanding that, at the appointed time, we will be with the Lord and forevermore, and we'll be with him in heaven. And it is a spiritual state, but it's incredible to think about his glory and the worship that's going to take place there. And this picture of these very powerful, interesting entities, these living creatures, oh my goodness, as well as men and women who are part of God's kingdom now and forever because of Christ. So yeah, what great explanations, Ed. I love your studies and how you pull things apart. And I appreciate the fact too that as you explain these things, you're saying you've studied it intently. There are other interpretations, maybe other views. Here's where you come down, but you're open to other people's views and through the contrastive thinking, right? See, I'm learning too. We can help with iron that sharpens iron, and we can keep growing in our knowledge of God and also, therefore, in our belief and faith in him. So very cool. Tell us where we go next. We're through chapter 4. Yeah. That was a quick chapter for you, my friend.
Yeah. It was quick. It's one of the rare times that I'll get through an entire chapter in one. I think chapter 4, in chapter 5, I'll probably get through that in one setting either. But then when we get to chapter 6, it's going to take a long time. But to answer your question, we're taking another quick interlude before we get to chapter 5, because I want to talk about, you talked about rapture. I mean, we talked about controversy and contrastive thinking and different views. We're going to talk about the rapture in the next 2. I'm going to spend 2 episodes talking about the so-called rapture. Easily the most controversial topic in all of eschatology. Christians, Christians have very different views on it. And I have my view, and you have your view, and I could be wrong. You could be. But what matters is that we put all the evidence out there and make your decision. I'll tell you why I believe what I believe. And
sure.
So there's two main controversies about the rapture. Controversy 1 is it even biblical? Is this idea that Jesus is going to come down and snap his fingers and people just disappear, poof, and go to heaven? Is that scriptural? Is that something that Christianese that Christians just kind of made up or misinterpreted? And we're going to just talk about that one next week. And the week after, we'll get into probably the biggest controversy, and that is the timing. When does the rapture actually happen vis-a-vis the period of time we call the tribulation? So next week, we are going to look into the idea of whether or not this concept of the rapture is even in the Bible. Is it biblical? Is it good, sound doctrine and theology? Yeah.
Well, that's great. Looking forward to that so much. So once again, thank you for your studies and for sharing this with us. I love every video clip. Want to encourage everyone to jump on faithbyreason.net, click like, subscribe, make sure you get notifications, because Ed's coming out with video postings, at least weekly, if not more often. But you want to be informed. You want to look forward and read and follow the next segment. so that when you and I connect up, people know a little bit more even what we're talking about or what you're talking about and explaining to us. So God bless you, brother. It's so great to be with you, and God bless everyone who's tuned in.
God bless you too, Pastor Jerry, and we will talk again next week.
All right. Thanks, mate.
Bye-bye.
Ciao, ciao. Hugs to the family too. Thank you.
You too.